My name's Darien Taylor, and I am a community member. That is to say that I'm a woman who's been living with HIV for close to 30 years now. The activism that I was involved in through AIDS Action Now and other work that I did, through my 30s and into my 40s, it's really almost a historical relic. You can't, even though we talk about, the heady days of HIV activism, it's gone. And not because the issues aren't there. It's because, the work I did existed in a world with no social media, where we barely had email. The world is brought to our doorstep and mediated in such a different way now that I think activism has to and has evolved along with those changes. And I would say I would focus particularly on the way that people access information through social media. I wrote for The Positive Side, which is Katie's magazine for people with HIV. I wrote an article on art and HIV, and I talked about the role of the poster, right? Which has always had the poster in terms of activism and art has such a history in a lot of social and political and sort of popular movements, right? And the poster is so great because it's so, printing is so cheap. It's so ephemeral. So it kind of, you put it up and it goes away, right? I mean, the rain takes it down over or poster scrapers on the street or whatever, take down the message. So the message can disappear. The message doesn't have to be, sometimes when we invest a lot of money in our brochures and our messages, right? You're attached to them because of the money you put into them, rather than because the validity of the message is ongoing, right? And I think, the posters are great too because they can be kind of inflammatory. They don't have to have a message that, a lot of the material that I see reads and looks about HIV, reads and looks nice, and it's like, we're not talking about something that's nice. We're not talking about fuzzy teddy bears and, hearts and that. We're talking about something that's really, primal and dirty and rough and illegal and loving and spiritual, but it's not fuzzy teddy bears, And too often, I think that's kind of, we kind of feel that we have to give a really sanitized, or we're compelled, by the powers that be to give a more sanitized message than I think it's really all about. And then that kind of misses the mark, right? Well, I'd encourage organizations, and they do, to take risks. Right? There's been a lot of risk-taking and a lot of, negotiated risk-taking that has been very brave, done by organizations like the AIDS Committee of Toronto with the information that they've produced around BDSM. They danced with their, government partners all through the development of that material. And, I think it's great. But I think organizations need to be encouraged to keep pushing that boundary, or to keep setting those boundaries, like pushing them so that they can be reset. So, I think AIDS organizations, absolutely. Community AIDS organizations, absolutely. But, I think sometimes when we get together in you know, and I say this from experience, when we get together in, you know, in meeting rooms and we sit down with, you know, designers, and some of that goes out the window, right? And it may be because you, the person in the AIDS organization, or you, the person with HIV, is feeling the discomfort, for example, of the people from the design firm who aren't, you know, dealing with this all the time. And I mean, too much, I think, everywhere in AIDS, people with AIDS and people who are advocates for people with AIDS, we try to accommodate the rest of the world, right? So that we can fit in some ways. And I think that's always to our detriment, right? Because then you help to create a world where you don't see yourself really represented. And yeah.